This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Ewan McGregor stars as Count Alexander Rostov in A Gentleman in Moscow, the new limited series based on the best-selling novel. Stream it with the Paramount Plus with Showtime plan. Visit ParamountPlus.com to try it free.
Welcome to The After Party, a TSF Network podcast, a mixtape of purposeful, encouraging, and fun content from across all the shows who are a part of our podcast network. I'm Heather Cook, Head of Advertising and Partnerships at the network.
And I'm Mandy Hernandez, the Project Manager. Thanks for joining us today on The After Party. Before we get into today's episode, if you didn't tune in yesterday, Heather shared about a listener survey we put together about all things The After Party. We want to know what you want to hear more of on this show, what we could do better, and just your overall feedback of who you are. Visit the show notes, click on that link that says survey, and answer some questions. We would be so grateful if you could take the time to do that, just so we can hear and learn more about you. Okay, let's get to it. Today's episode is from the Carlos Whittaker Podcast, and it's called Policing in America with Edwin Raymond.
I'm so excited for this. And just a little backstory, Edwin is an ex-NYPD officer, and today Carlos sits down with Edwin and he gives a very important perspective on policing in America. He shares why he becomes a police officer, why he stepped away, and what he thinks can help the system. So let's tune in.
Okay, let's hop right into it. Today, speaking of books, I have had for the longest time, since 2020, and I was speaking up on the Black experience, the male Black experience in America and all of the things. I had a lot of people that were asking me to put a police officer on the show. And I couldn't find the right one. The right one meaning there's actually two police officers that I want to put on the show, and I finally found one of them. I wanted someone that was well-versed, not emotive, yet understood that there is work to be done. And I feel like I have found that in today's guest. Today's guest is Edwin Raymond. Edwin, first of all, I love that name. Edwin served in the New York PD, NYPD, for over 15 years. He served for over 15 years, and he was born and raised in East Brooklyn. So you've got a New York native policing his own neighborhoods. And what Edwin dives into, he wrote a book called An Inconvenient Cop. I love that. And it's called My Fight to Change Policing in America. This is a 15-year police veteran that realized there are things that need to be fixed. Now, he's not coming from the perspective of abolishing the police. To be honest with you, I understand the perspective that people have when they say that, and I get it. I'm just not of that. It's okay. It's okay if we disagree, but I'm just not of that mindset and that opinion. I'm grateful for policing in America. I'm grateful for police in my community, and I'm grateful for the times I've had to call 911 and they've showed up. But I'm not grateful for the times I've had to call 911 at 11 p.m. when my family wasn't here and I was locked out of my house, but there was a strange van in my driveway and I was freaking out because of some things that happened on the internet. And I thought, oh my gosh, and I called 911. But then I had to tell the 911 operator, you're going to see a Black man standing in the front yard. That's me. I know this is an old white neighborhood, but it's me. So I didn't love having to say that, but I just felt like I had to, right? So I've been looking for a police officer to come in and help us. And Edwin is step one in that conversation. You know, this book is, I don't read a lot of books. I write books. I just don't read a lot of books. I devoured this one, you know, to see that why Edwin became a police officer and then why he stepped away and what he thinks can help the system. It's an incredible conversation. I think that you're going to really be not only intrigued, but it's going to give you some answers that even I have been looking for a long time. So Human Hope family, this is a really good one. It's an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful for Edwin for allowing me the opportunity to interview him. Sit back and enjoy this conversation with Edwin Raymond. Okay, Human Hope family, I am actually holding in my hand this book, An Inconvenient Cop. An inconvenient cop. You've heard of an inconvenient truth. Well, now we got an inconvenient truth teller in Edwin Raymond. Edwin, say hey to the Human Hope family.
Human Hope family, how are you? It's a pleasure to be on the show. I can't wait to get into the details.
Yes, let's do it. Well, just so the Human Hope family knows, I started following you in the midst of 2020. The summer of 2020 is when I stumbled across your page, and I was at the same time kind of telling some inconvenient truths from my perspective as a Black man in Nashville, Tennessee, and what I was kind of dealing with. And, you know, Edwin, as I had these conversations with a lot of people, and here's the thing, I'd never had these conversations before, right? Suddenly I was thrust into having these conversations. A lot of my followers were like, well, Carlos, like, it's not really that bad. Like I understand, you know, kind of your perspective on policing, and maybe things are different. I want you to just start from Jump Street and tell us about your history in policing, and just kind of tell us your story and where this book came about.
Absolutely. So, you know, I was born and raised and still live in the East Flatbush section of Brooklyn. And this was the old New York. You know, it was rough. Violence was exponentially more than it is now.
Yeah.
I grew up really rough childhood. I lost my mom at a very young age. I was only 3.
Wow.
My dad didn't speak English. Yeah, my dad migrated here from Haiti, so he didn't speak English.
Okay.
It was a rough childhood.
Yeah.
Despite that surrounding, though, I was able to walk a pretty straight path.
Wow.
But around 15 years old, that didn't stop the police from harassing me as well as others in the community.
Wow.
And for a few years, I went through that harassment. And around 18, I made what's now I realized was a crazy decision. I said, when I'm going to join the police department when I can, to analyze it, see why these things happen, and most importantly, what can be done about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You say, see these things happen. Can you start speaking a little bit into some more detail as what these things means?
Yeah. So when everything aligns and we get to a point where someone, you know, needlessly loses, you know, their lives, where people needlessly lose their lives at the hands of police.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is when people pay attention. This is when it goes viral. This is when we go out in march, we demand change. But I was more focused on the insidious things, right? And what I learned is those insidious things, the everyday harassment, the everyday behavior of police is what often leads to those deaths that we didn't see viral. Yeah. So these things is harassment, racial profiling. I didn't know it then, but quotas and pressure on police for enforcement activity, which includes tickets, summonses, arrest, stop and frisk, just everything that's contributing to just discriminatory, racist policing.
Yeah. I hear you say that. You say quotas. Like there's actual quotas that officers have to fulfill in their policing?
Yeah. You know, police departments have to deny it because it's unlawful. You know, every state you go to, there's no state where it's legal. So they'll deny it. But this is how it functions. It's all about those numbers. Those numbers on the spreadsheets every 28 days is what matters. And this is what, more than anything else that I've observed in 15 years in law enforcement, the pressure to meet the demands of those numbers and the incentive structure is more responsible for police certain behaviors, especially the detrimental behaviors that we see, than really even the personal biases, the politics. More than anything else, it's the demand to meet those numbers.
Wow. So, okay. So now take us into the beginning of your policing. Take us into the beginning of, okay, now I don't know when it was that you joined the police force, but now you're in and you begin to see these things. Walk us through those first few years of maybe here you are, like a local, like you're policing your neighborhood, your people. Tell us about the dichotomy of what was happening in your heart and in your mind as you were doing this.
Yeah. So I'll actually start with the police academy, right?
Okay.
I'm 22 years old. It's 2008. A senator from Illinois is about to become president, and I'm in the police academy. Because of the experiences that I've had, the experiences that I know that many of us have had, I'm assuming at 22 that we're taught to police that way. I was actually quite shocked, Carlos, when after the 6 months, after the end of the journey, I couldn't make the correlation between the harassment that I knew I received and the training. Yeah, so I was like, wait, so what is it if it's not the training?
Yeah.
Day one on actual patrol after graduating the police academy, we were given quotas, right? 4 arrests, 10 tickets, 10 stop and frisk.
Wow.
And at first I said to myself, maybe they're giving us this pressure so we can get what they call enforcement activity, so that when it happens organically, we'll be familiar with the paperwork and the procedures, etc. But it was relentless, right? Every day it was all about those numbers. And then I started to watch peers that I knew from the police academy and the decisions that they would make. And when I would speak to them after, it would always be, well, I'm just trying to get my numbers out the way.
Wow.
And I started essentially zooming out and doing the math. We have 36,000 police officers, that work in these particular communities with these same numbers. And I started doing the math in terms of how much money that generates for the city through the summonses getting paid.
Okay.
And I realized, this system it's like a modern, it's everything we've seen in America when it comes to how Black people are treated, but with a veil of legitimacy over it. You understand?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So day one, you're thinking, okay, the quota is just so that they can make sure that I get out there and I see and I feel and experience everything. But you're saying that quota isn't just for rookie cops. That is, you got veterans that are out there having to meet the same numbers.
It's how the entire system operates. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is why, in specialized units, most of them don't have quotas. This is why officers try to get into these units.
Wow.
To get off the hamster wheel. You understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
But to get into the unit, you have to go above the quotas to get the recommendation to go into the unit. So you still have to play the game to ascend out of the it's a terrible cycle.
Wow. Okay, so did you, as you're policing now and you're in your first few years, are you feeling at all like you're helping? Are you feeling at all like you know what? Like I've been able to help a little bit. I've been able to, like, what are you doing differently with your partner? Again, I don't know. I'm not familiar with how it works in policing, but what are you doing that is counterintuitive or counteractive to what maybe the rest of the police force is doing?
So the one thing that being a cop, even at 22 as a rookie, allowed me to do was just engage with our communities, right?
Yeah.
So what I did different was especially when it was a younger person,
sure,
I would drop gems on them. I would help them see the bigger picture and understand the decisions they make today can affect tomorrow. And I really take advantage of those interactions. And some of them I'm still friends with to this day.
Really?
They're older now. Some of them have families. Yeah, and they're doing great. And many of them, they say thank you. When I was 16, you didn't see me as just a knucklehead, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that early in my career, that's how I kind of gave back and made sure that I did something differently. Also, I didn't adhere to the quota system, and that eventually led to a lot of retaliation. But I just couldn't do it. I could not get down. Like, if you did something in front of me, I will take police action, but I would still use my discretion, which my sergeant he didn't agree with, because for everyone you let go because it's a minor infraction, you're not meeting the quota. So there was a lot of clashing very early in my career.
Wow. And are these quotas, are you getting, are police officers in the system that you were in getting, I don't know, rewarded? I guess what would that is it more of like you hit the quota, you get a reward, or is it more you don't hit the quota, something bad happens? Like what is the draw towards the quota?
So if you hit the quota exactly as it is what you said. You just move on. When you don't hit it, you get reprimanded. But when you go above the quota, that's when you get rewarded, right? If they're asking for 4 and you're bringing 6 and 8 arrests a month, when it's, 3 years into your career, you can put in for the detective squad and you're going to get the opportunity to become a detective. You understand? If you put in for a specialized unit, say you were in the Air Force and you want to go to aviation, you surpass the quota, you put in for the unit, you're most likely getting into aviation. You understand? And there's over 300 units in the New York City Police Department, specialized units, but you won't, it doesn't matter what education you come from, what experience you come with. If you don't first play the numbers game, you don't have a chance.
Wow. So, would you say, Edwin, that the numbers game is the initial bottom line problem with policing in the system that we have right now?
Well, that's what I found, because here's the thing, right? The people who set the numbers, the people who created the system were the bigots and the racists and those that had a lot of racial bias. But they've essentially found a way to bake their perspectives into policy. So by the time, young Officer Whittaker puts the uniform on, despite where his politics are, despite where his biases are, if he simply goes along with the system, he's contributing to white supremacy. He's contributing to discriminatory policing, despite how he feels about any ethnicity. You understand? So it's why it's so dangerous. It's systemic. You understand?
Yeah. No, I understand. I understand. So, okay, let's talk about some of the systemic parts of maybe someone that's listening to this going like, well, I mean, how is this systemic if, do the officers in affluent white parts of New York have the same quotas that the officers in Brooklyn or different parts of New York that maybe are majority black? Like, are these quotas across the table, or are they more based in systems or in spaces that are non-white?
Yeah, and this is where it becomes a violation of the 14th Amendment, right? In the white areas, you cannot police this way. You wouldn't last a week policing this way. But some will try to justify and say, well, we don't have the same crime issues in the white area, so why would we police the same way? Here's the problem, right? And it's called the broken windows theory.
Okay.
Broken windows, the notion of broken windows is, let's not ignore the minor things, because that's what will stop the bigger things, right? And it has a common sense appeal to it.
Sure.
But it's just not realistic. The theory it's not empirically supported. It doesn't make sense. The idea is, if we ignore the weed and the open container at 2 p.m., that could become the homicide at 10 p.m., right? Making a false subtext, drawing a false subtext that behavior leads to homicides. The thing is, the number one thing that's enforced are substance-related offenses, right? Alcohol, marijuana. Those things happen at similar or even higher rates in white areas. So if that open container, if that weed was what led to homicides, then where are the homicides in the white area? You understand? It's a false correlation. And unfortunately, this is what's been driving policing since about the mid-90s.
Wow. Okay.
Broken windows theory.
Broken windows theory. So let's go from 10 feet above New York where you are, and let's fly up to 50,000 feet. And now we're looking at America in general. Are you saying that, and do you have stories or a viewpoint where this isn't just a New York policing problem? This could be applied to policing in America, and this is something that you found?
So what I've learned is, when smaller police departments are looking for new leadership, they often go to either retiring or newly retired NYPD chiefs.
Okay.
So what those chiefs then do is they recreate what they know. They bring the numbers game, the quotas, ComStat, they bring the entire system, the structure to other police departments.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the cancer spreads and it becomes nationwide. Miami is Ferguson. After Mike Brown's death, the Department of Justice report, it exposed the quota system and how it's monetized. And other surrounding jurisdictions would come into Ferguson to meet their numbers because those tickets become money for those respective police departments and cities, et cetera. So this thing, unfortunately, from New York as the epicenter, it is spread around the nation. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I think we've got the pain point now. Like I've heard the pain point that is inconvenient for a lot of people to hear that. What do we do, Edwin? I mean, where's the medicine that is going to be injected into this system that hopefully will heal it? What's next?
Yeah, and that's probably the most important question after identifying the issue. So we have to cut the cancer out, right?
Okay.
And the way we do that is eliminate quotas and pressure and the detrimental parts of ComStat. It's a system that was developed in the 90s that exacerbated the issue because
ComStat?
ComStat, compared statistics.
Okay.
Yeah. It essentially, it's a computer system that showed hotspots where serious crime would happen, but then commanders responsible for those areas would then have to increase their broken windows enforcement as a response. So sometimes that happened and crime went down. Sometimes that happened and crime went up. But as long as there was a sizable broken windows response to areas with high crime, the commander was basically told, you did a good job, you did what you could, and they moved on.
Yeah.
We have to move away from those systems. Since I've been a whistleblower for the last 7 years, over 2,000 cops from across the nation, even one as far as the Metropolitan Police in the UK, contacted me and said, we're having the same issues here.
Wow.
So what I did is I did the research, and at some point in the 90s or early 2000s, you can find that their police leadership sent representatives to New York. And then they would learn New York system and bring it back, So I realized it all goes back. Yeah, a lot of it goes back to New York.
That is mind blowing. So, I mean, I hear remove the broken windows style of policing and the quotas and things. Is that possible? Let's see if take it one step farther and how do these things get removed? Is it replacing leadership? Are those even voted positions? What are ways that this can actually begin tangibly for people that are listening? They're like, okay, I gotta figure out how to change this in my community. What can people do tangibly?
Sure. So most police leadership, they're appointed positions, right? But the appointments are made by elected officials. So it does start with voting. We have to put the right people in the right positions, starting with the elected officials that appoint the leadership. So most cities, that would be the mayor.
Yeah.
We have to choose mayors that are going to choose leaders that are visionaries. Justice-minded law enforcement is the term that I use. We have to put the justice-minded in the room. If we could put them in the position of leadership, even better.
Sure.
But if they're not the leaders, they at least have to be in the room to be a counterweight to the typical antiquated ways of doing things. So it does start with leadership. Second, we have to educate ourselves on why quotas is much more than just a nuisance, because when I started blowing the whistle on quotas, people would say, oh yeah, who doesn't know cops have quotas? But it's not just harassment. Sandra Bland was pulled over for a broken, was it either tail light or signaling? That is a broken windows type offense. Philando Castile lost his life for a tail light. That is a broken windows. Eric Garner. I mean, you can go down the list. When I see police killings that start with a minor infraction, and then I do the research into that police department, you will find at some point there was a whistleblower that tried to expose the quotas, but us as a society, we're not really understanding the importance of what's being exposed to take the proper action.
Wow. Hearing this and knowing that a lot of, I've got listeners that, a lot of listeners that are law enforcement families, right? Like their spouses, they live within law enforcement. I would love for you to talk to them for a minute. I would love for you to even encourage them for a minute because I mean, let's be honest, you were in it, right? I was watching, you were in it, and the ire of the eye of America, which I think rightfully so, went towards police are awful, police are bad, but ultimately, there's law enforcement officers and there's law enforcement families that were like you, that are like, no, this isn't the way that it should be. Can you talk to them for a second? Can you just encourage them for a minute?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I say in the book is police are the muscle of the system, but not the system itself, right? But when you say system, most of the times, the people that you see and interact with are the police. So people oversimplify the system to being the police themselves. But as you said, and the term that I use to describe them is the justice-minded. Justice-minded law enforcement exists. The problem is the environment doesn't exist for them to speak out without it being very risky to their careers and livelihoods. You understand? I'm very vulnerable in this work about my childhood and how poor I grew up. When you think about that, Carlos, I'm the last person that should be doing this. I was able to get a career where I make a decent amount of money. I don't have a family yet, but when I become a father, hopefully I become a father one day, my children will not have to suffer the way I did. And yet I'm jeopardizing the ability to give them resources because I'm jeopardizing my career. If we're waiting for a whole bunch of whistleblowers, it's not going to happen. It's too risky as a society. Our job is to make the landing softer so that more people are willing to speak up. Our job is to give the justice-minded a platform, a seat at the table, if you will, so that we can get these changes. And I understand today many are cynical. They're like, think about it. Prior to George Floyd, there are people that used to say, we need to reform, we need to find ways to reform. That after George Floyd, they said, we need to abolish, we need to defund, right? The cynicism is absolutely there. And I don't blame them, because if I wasn't on the inside, if I didn't have a real look behind a curtain myself, I might have been right there with them. But I'm telling you, this thing is fixable. We can move the needle in the right direction. We just have to know what buttons to press.
Yeah. And, I'm assuming in your book, you get into some of those buttons. You get into some of those buttons that we need to press.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me this. Have you seen any police departments in America? Are there examples of police departments that have begun to shift, that have begun to change, that are beginning to police in a different way, that is a healthier version of policing in America?
So maybe not an entire department, but because of the work of activists, of elected officials, of whistleblowers, we, right here in New York, for instance, we went from nearly 700,000 unlawful stop and frisk in 2011 to less than 50,000 in 2014 after the federal court case. You understand? We went from 65% of arrests being marijuana related to the decriminalization of marijuana, and now full legalization of marijuana. So when we put the pressure in the right places, the work does happen, and we do feel the difference in the quality of life. Now, the young folks, this is their norm. They don't even understand what they just missed if they were just 5 years older. But folks, anybody born before 1998 in New York can tell you there's a difference.
Wow.
They feel it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And it's encouraging. I feel like what I do love about your story and your work is there are a lot of people out there just screaming about the problems. There's a lot of people out there that are just like, crush it all, completely erase it all. Let's have a free for all in society. And what I love about your work is you are pointing to the pain point, but you're also giving solutions that I think are very practical solutions. And I'm just grateful for your voice. I'm grateful for your work. I'm grateful for your vulnerability. And I do feel like hopefully people that are listening to the podcast right now will be like, okay, wait a second. I don't feel like the sky is falling anymore. I feel like there is some hope. This podcast is called Human Hope, and you're giving us that. So I just appreciate that.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate your words. I'm dedicated to this mission. I'm very passionate about it. And yeah, I don't know if I'm going to see all of it, but I hope we can see enough of the changes that we know that it's worth doing the work. Because there's a lot of people that they just don't have hope anymore. Yeah. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. No. Where are places that people can find you? Where are places that people can kind of make sure that they're keeping up with your work if they want to kind of join in this cause?
Yeah, so Instagram is where people, they hit me up the most. It's just Edwin Raymond or E.Raymond _
Okay.
Edwin Raymond NYC on Twitter. Those are the two main spaces. But from Instagram, you can get my email address. Again, over 2,000 law enforcement have hit me up, but so has many other people around the world. Thankfully, one of the biggest blessings in this journey has been the support.
Yeah.
A lot of influential people have supported me, like our brother Carl.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for Carl and his supporting me. Many people reached out after the interview I did with Carl.
Yeah.
And so many other things I've done, Trevor Noah, Sean King, et cetera. The support system has been great. And you give me, it might not be immediate, but I will reach back out to you.
Yes.
I will answer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for writing this book. I again want to recommend everybody pick this up, and not only pick it up, but spread the word. This is something that actually can shift when enough hands are involved. So thank you, Edwin, for your time today. You literally have been the definition of human hope.
Thank you, brother. I don't know if I could accept that. I'm too modest to accept that. But I'll work towards fulfilling that. When I feel that in my soul, I'll give you a call and say, I think I'm there.
Yeah, right on. I like that. No, I like that. Thank you, Edwin. That was, I think, difficult to hear in some spaces, in some spots, but also really empowering. I love that he talked about law enforcement families and how people oversimplify the problem and oversimplify the system to the police themselves when the police are literally just in a system. that many times doesn't allow them to do the important work that they feel called to do. And so if you're a police officer or a police officer family, know that I'm grateful for you. I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for a whole lot that the police do. I'm so thankful for the police officers that ran into the Covenant School here in Nashville, Tennessee, and saved those kids. I'm thankful that they put their life on the line. They risk their lives. I'm thankful for a whole lot. And I'm thankful for messy conversations that, we may agree with some, we may not agree with all. I mean, I don't agree with everything that Edwin said, but I'm grateful for everything that he said because he's looking at it from a different window, a different perspective than I am. Again, I've said this before on the podcast and I'll say it again. We're all looking at the same thing, right? We're looking at the same room. But if we all are looking at the same room from the same wall and the same window, as opposed to walking around to the other side of the room from the outside and looking in from a different window, you're going to get a completely different perspective. You're going to see things on the sofa, on the front of the sofa that you couldn't see from the other window because you're just looking at the back of the sofa. And what Edwin has done is he's pulled us away from the window we've all been looking at it through and taken us to the other side where there's another window with a different perspective. But it's the same room and we still see the same thing. Does that make sense?
Thanks for listening today. If you are interested in hearing more from the Carlos Whittaker Podcast, because who wouldn't, make sure you search for the name in your podcast listening app and make sure you hit that follow button for more episodes.
And if you haven't given us a follow here on the After Party feed, would you do that today? That guarantees that any new episode we publish will go straight to your podcast feed. We hope you will join us tomorrow. See you then.